Hi, I'm Tom Loucks, Wisconsin Rapids Community Media Coordinator for the City of Wisconsin Rapids. And today my guest is Steve Toft. Welcome, Steve.
Well, good morning, Tom. Glad to be here.
Alrighty, thanks for coming. Steve is running for congressman in the 3rd Congressional District here in Wisconsin. And we're going to get to know him quite a bit better here over this conversation over the next half hour or so. But first, I'm going to have Steve introduce himself, tell us a little bit about himself, his family, and then we'll also get into what what he represents, his district, so you know exactly where when you're at the poll, you see his name, or if you don't see his name and you're watching this, then this will actually help you know more. So, Steve, go ahead, introduce yourself, and where you're from.
Well, it is great to be back in Wood County and Wisconsin Rapids. I was counting up, and over this campaign, this is the 16th time that I've been to Wood County and been to Rapids many times. I'm from Osseo, Trempealeau County. I was born and raised on a farm, went to college in Eau Claire, and I joined the military shortly after graduation. I wasn't planning on making it a long career, but it was a great life. Met my wife, Carla, who was a young Army nurse at the time. And, we've been married 29 years. God blessed us with a great family, 2 boys and a girl. In fact, my youngest son is a U.S. Air Force pilot right now. And my wife is retired from the military, too. She retired a colonel and is now delivering babies at Mayo in Eau Claire. So, it's terrific to be back home in Osseo, where I'm a farmer. I went back to my roots. I've got a small 300-acre farm that we raise corn and soybeans this year, and we got all the corn picked and still waiting for it to dry out a little bit to get those beans in. But, it's really terrific to be able to be over here and share some time with you, Tom.
Alrighty, thanks for coming again. Well, let's get into some of the questions that I have here for you, but I guess before we start the questions, I kind of want to know a little bit about that district that you're in. It's changed over the years, not recently, but in the past. So you represent this part of Wood County, Wisconsin Rapids. Can you tell us a few more areas that you represent?
So the 3rd Congressional District is a large district. It's 18 counties. Goes all the way from Portage County in the northeast, all the way west to just south of Hudson River Falls, down the Mississippi to Iowa, Illinois, and then back up west to Madison, back up to Stevens Point. So a really big area. Over this campaign, I've traveled 48,000 miles throughout this district, and I've met with hundreds of groups and thousands of people. And they really like my background. I'm a farmer, a veteran. I was in the military 32 years, and I was a medical officer most of that time. I ran a large part of the military healthcare system, everything on the West Coast through the Pacific to Japan, Korea, and all the healthcare on ships. Was responsible for over 500,000 beneficiaries and about $1 billion worth of healthcare. When I left that job, they sent me to my final job where I was the post commander of a large installation in Texas. Had 85,000 people working there. I had a large staff of about 9,000. And, great responsibility, but, it was part of the federal government. And I really learned, close up the problems and the waste and abuse that the federal government has. And, those are some of the things that the people in this district want to have fixed.
All right. Well, let's go into some questions that'll help people get to know a little bit about what you support and where you're at. We hear that there's always concerns in Wisconsin area, major concerns and what's going on in the area that you're running for. Are any of those that are on your mind that you want to talk about that's concerning you now that maybe you want to fix or what's good?
As I traveled around this large district, I've heard a recurring theme. Farmers are angry, veterans are angry, and everyone is angry about career politicians. They all, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, everyone wants term limits because they are the it's the root of so much of the evil in Washington. People stay there forever and they become career politicians. They no longer represent our interests here in the district. You know, for example, Mr. Kind has been there 22 years, and he takes over 80% of his money from special interest lobbyists outside the state. That's what he's running current, radio and TV commercials with, special interest money. Who does he represent? He represents those special interests and not us here in the state. Now, the other two groups, farmers and veterans, are angry because we haven't had, and I am both a farmer and a veteran. And veterans, we have not had adequate representation in Washington. The VA is in terrible shape. They're 20 years behind civilian health care. You know, everybody who is listening here, you know, we're blessed in this area to have terrific health care. Our veterans are not. You know, you've heard of the tremendous problems that we had at the Toma VA. That's just indicative of a system that really needs to have somebody who understands healthcare and how to run a great healthcare system. You know, the VA has does not even have an electronic health record. Can you imagine that? Going in and doing everything paper and pencil, and being able to, you know, it leads to bad outcomes, it leads to poor care, and it's costly. And it leads to other organizations not wanting to work with them. So in this area, it's a real struggle to get the outside network hospitals, when a veteran is referred to an outside hospital, to even want to see that patient, because they understand that it's going to take forever to get paid from the VA, and they don't do analog business anymore. So everything has to be faxed or hand carried. That leads to terrible health care for our veterans. So we really need to have somebody that understands healthcare and is willing to really work, and that's what you'd have with me.
All right. Well, we know healthcare is expensive. We're all going through that throughout our country, and you know, I think we're open to anybody talking about what they can do to help it. Republican, Democrat, Independent. It doesn't matter. We really need to. The healthcare is where we're going. I think anybody would think that. Let's go on to the next question. Federal deficit. We all know it's getting higher, higher, and higher. Is there anything that can be done, or anything that you could think of that could help with that area?
Oh, absolutely. You know, the federal deficit is $21 trillion. And this last year in 2018, that the fiscal year ended, the government's year ended at the end of September, we paid $310 billion just on the interest on our debt. It's one of the largest areas of our spending in the federal government. And it's predicted that if we don't stop deficit spending, it's going to be our largest portion of our federal budget. So let me give you a solid example of how we can save money. So when I was the post commander of the installation in Texas, I had a staff of about 9,000. I walked around like a good commander does to get input to see how things are going, and I found that many people were gone in the afternoon. And I said, well, do we need to hire people? Oh no, they're there. I said, well, I'll come back earlier. The next week I came back earlier just after lunch, and they were gone already. I said, they must come in very early. Oh no, they come in at 9 o'clock. I said, well, I need to talk to them. So a long story short is that my installation had grown just like the federal government, way bigger than it needs to be. And at the end of my 3-year tour there, I had reduced our workforce from 9,000 by 400 people. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, but if you reduce 400 people from a 9,000, that's over $20 million a year in savings. And we became more efficient, we became more capable, and we created opportunities for people to advance. So that's one small place in one agency of government, that can be replicated everywhere. And we wouldn't lose a thing. And we'd be able to take that money that we'd save to be able to put it into, strengthening Social Security, Medicare, all the infrastructure, things that are really important to people.
Yes, definitely. Well, I think that leads us into healthcare, another expensive piece that we all have to do, and with all the Obamacare and now Trump, the Trump care, all these cares that are coming out, I guess, and rising prescription costs. We all know that gets up our pills, or face the fact we all pretty much have to have those nowadays, and because of a lot of it's our lifestyle we live. But what are your thoughts about trying to maybe fix that here in Wisconsin?
Well, people understand that I am a healthcare expert. I've run successful large healthcare organizations, and we can fix Obamacare with some steps that we can take right here in Wisconsin and in Washington. So we need to repeal Obamacare. First, large overarching umbrella systems in the federal government don't work. We see that in every aspect of government. We need to support the 10th Amendment and bring back control back to the state and local governments. I think we're in great shape here in Wisconsin. Obamacare didn't work. We were told that if you liked your plan, you were going to be able to keep it. That didn't happen for hardly anyone. If you liked your doctor, you weren't able, they weren't able to keep him. So the thing that I saw that it looked like the best plan was the Graham-Cassidy plan from a couple years ago, which brings block grants back to the state so that the state can manage health care. We're well positioned in Wisconsin to be able to do that. We provide badger care for our underprivileged people, and it's a great program. And we could, with that federal money, be able to provide all the health care necessary for people with pre-existing conditions as well. Establish a high-risk pool, and no one would fall through the cracks, and we'd be able to provide health care to everyone here in Wisconsin, because so many people have been priced out of the healthcare market. I've talked to hundreds of families that said, when Obamacare came into existence, first our healthcare premiums doubled, then they tripled, and then they became totally unaffordable. And now they're living with risk in their lives. So that, who can afford $50,000 for healthcare between their premiums and their deductible? And that's the average family here in Wisconsin. If you don't have an employer that's helping pay for health care, if you're not working for the government, you're in a boat like that, and it's going to sink.
Yeah, 50,000 is more than most people make.
Exactly.
In this area, and you represent rural Wisconsin, which is a lot of farmers.
Exactly.
That are on their own, not a big corporation.
Exactly.
So, well, let's move on to the next question that I have is let's talk about drugs and opioid addiction. It's getting more and more in our area, especially even in this area. There's been a lot of seminars about how to help with that by local organizations right here in Wisconsin Rapids, and I guess on the federal side of what you would be representing Wisconsin, what would you do?
Well, opioids is a significant problem in Wisconsin and nationwide. First of all, we need to stem the flow of opioids into the country. Most of the opioids that come into the country come across our southern border. ICE seized 1 million pounds of illegal drugs last year, and that's only what they seized. So much more came across the border. We need to have border security. We need to absolutely have a barrier so that illegal drugs can't cross our border. That to start with is part of the problem. And then we do need to invest in education, prevention, and treatment programs so that we can get people off drugs and get them trained and get them to be productive and back into the workforce.
Definitely. There's a lot of stuff in that. Let's talk a little bit about your ideas that comes to immigration reform then. That kind of fits right in. So let's hear a little bit about your ideas and thoughts on that.
Well, immigration reform is something that everybody in this district is concerned about because, if we don't reform the way we enforce our immigration laws, it's going to, most people don't realize the cost. It's costing us $100 billion as a nation to not enforce our immigration laws. Increased use of social services, increase in our incarceration, increase of in crime. So in this last year, we had ICE arrested 10,000 sexual predators nationwide through their immigration enforcement, and 1,500 murderers as well. Those are people that we don't need to have in our country. We need to have a wall. We need to build a wall, and that will help with stemming the flow of drugs, and it will also help with another problem that people don't realize, but a public health issue. We have millions of people crossing our border who have diseases that we've eradicated here in the United States. Tuberculosis, all kinds of diseases. They're walking across the border and just assimilating into our country and, infecting people. And, that's half of it. We need to address the visa program. So we need to have everyone in the United States documented, and everyone either needs to be here on a school or a work visa. Our work visa, guest worker program for farmers needs to be addressed. Currently, the H-2C program is what farmers and other manufacturers and whatnot use to have guest workers. It's only good for 10 months. That's unworkable. We need to be able to increase that to a more workable time period, say 3 years, so that good guest workers are here and they don't have to leave the country after 10 months, because that never happens, and then reapply. So those are some common sense things that we can do to really address the immigration issue.
Well, if you're just joining us here on Making Connections with myself, Tom Loucks, as the coordinator for WRCM, my guest here is Steve Toft, and he's running in the 3rd Congressional District here as a congressman. And remember, get out and vote. You can early vote now, but the polls are going to open on November 6th. That's next week already, coming quick. So get out there. He represents this district here and in Wisconsin Rapids, as well as other areas. He traveled over 48,000 miles over the past few months here, talking to people like yourselves that are watching this. So thanks for watching us. And we got a few more questions yet to go in the interview, and glad that you have stayed tuned. Let's talk about small business. You're in it now as a farmer, and that's really important for rural communities. So what can you do to help a small business, farming and non-farming?
Well, small business is the backbone of this country. As farmers are small businessmen, and we need to be able to support them with technology. One of the things I've heard across this district is that we need better broadband connectivity, because farmers need that. Farmers' children need to be able to do their schoolwork. They need to be able to get connected, and all of our small businesses are all have to be online. We need to be able to invest in that. When we first fielded electricity across this country, a lot of the companies didn't want to go back in each valley to the end of the road to have electricity to each home, but that was necessary. That's something that everybody needed, and everybody needs broadband now as well. So I am for federal grants to be able to bring back some federal dollars to Wisconsin to help Wisconsin get connected. As a farmer, it's very important to me. And we don't have representation in Congress. There are 8 congressmen in this state. Not one of them are farmers. And I'm told on January 3rd, when I'm sworn in, I'm going to be put on the Agriculture Committee. So I'm going to be able to include items like that in the Farm Bill to be able to ensure that we are supporting our farmers, and we have a fair farm bill, and that we're able to develop our world markets and be able to sell all the commodities that we produce across this huge district. It goes from dairy farming to grain farmers, to cranberry growers, to the potato and vegetable growers. A very diverse district, and we really need to have a voice in Washington to be able to represent farmers.
All right. Well, you just mentioned in the writing of the new farm bill. I believe it's still a bill yet in 2018. Is there a new one out there? Or I know the 2014 I believe has expired. So you would like to write some new stuff in for this bill.
So it's unfortunate that the farm bill did expire. It's for every 4 years, and it expired at the end of September. So the plus and the minus for that is that if we already had a farm bill, we wouldn't have had any Wisconsin input to it. But now that we don't, when I'm sworn in, I will be able to help write that farm bill, ensure that we have fair prices for our farmers. We can start by doing some work in Wisconsin and nationally. We don't drink enough milk right now. We can help encourage schools, and we can help encourage other government organizations to serve more milk, serve more cheese, serve more cottage cheese in our programs that we support. Breakfast programs, lunch programs for kids. We have kids that are apologies to the soda distributors, but I think we need to get back to drinking more milk here in Wisconsin and nationally.
Well, I know my kids drink plenty of it, so that's a good thing. So no, we all like milk. So I just had to put that in there. And yeah, you bet. Good stuff. Well, let's talk about tariffs and trade. It's a big thing in the news that we hear all the time. And I guess I want to know how you feel about tariffs that are happening right now by President Trump.
Well, I think the president and I see it the same way. Neither one of us want tariffs. We want to have free trade. We want to have a fair system, internationally. For so long, we've had such poor trade agreements with the European Union, with NAFTA, and with Asia. The president does not want to impose tariffs on people, but it's a national security issue where he started with tariffs on steel and aluminum. We don't produce steel and aluminum here in the United States anymore. That's a national security issue. Should we have to take on a formidable adversary somewhere? We ramped up our production in World War II, to build tanks, to build artillery, to build airplanes. Who would we have to buy our steel from? From those foreign countries who probably won't even want to sell it to us. So we're beholden to them. Right now, with the tariffs, we're building back up our steel and aluminum industries here in the United States. And the threat of tariffs has brought the European Union to the table. The media did not do a good job reporting this, but a couple months ago, we worked out a tremendous new deal with the European Union. We had to put in a $25,000 a car tariff on each BMW and Mercedes coming into the country. When we threatened that, they came to the table ready to negotiate. Now we have a great new deal with them. The same thing with NAFTA. President Obama said we'd need to have a magic wand to change NAFTA and have a better deal. Well, I think the president maybe has a magic wand, because we just have an agreement for the new USMCA that opens up Canadian markets for our dairy industry. It did away with the 270% tariffs that the Canadians were imposing on our dairy products. I mean, that's a very good start. It imposed a required $16 an hour in Mexican factories that are producing auto parts for us. That's going to encourage that kind of manufacturing to come back to the United States. So we already are seeing tremendous benefit of renegotiated trade agreements. And that's going to work with China too. We've had a trade imbalance of over $500 billion a year with China. We're their number one consumer of Chinese goods. And it's already hurt, the tariffs that we've imposed on Chinese goods have already hurt the Chinese. Their stock market is way down. Their GDP is projected to be as low as it ever has been. And they are going to come to the United States next month. No, this month, it's 1st of November, this month to negotiate. And I'm sure that we're going to have a much better deal with the Chinese because they rely on us to consume their goods, and I think it's going to work out. And we'll end up with no tariffs, and we'll end up with free trade.
Alrighty. Let's talk about partisan politics. Republican, Democrat, right now definitely in our country, I think all of us can see that there's differences more than ever. Maybe not. Maybe it's the media making that hype. Tell me what you feel about partisan politics, or you're running on the Republican ticket, because that's where it is. Just give me a little bit of insight on that.
Well, partisan politics is one of the reasons why Congress has one of the lowest approval ratings of any organization in this country. It's in the teens. People think that career politicians and the lack of term limits has definitely contributed to the problems that we have. The gridlock. If we had term limits, everybody would be in the same boat. No one would be entrenched. No one would be working for Washington lobbyists, and they'd be encouraged to work together. That's what I did over my long career in the military. I was a leader. I brought together, I was responsible for tens of thousands of troops, their lives really in peacetime and at war. And I brought together people from every part of this country, from California to New York to Kansas to Wisconsin, focused them to accomplish missions for this country. And we did. We did a lot of great things, and we need that kind of leadership in Washington. Because you know what the average politician is, or the most common politician is in Washington? And apologies to all you lawyers out there, but most of them are lawyers with very little experience. Just like Mr. Kine. He had one job for a short time as an assistant DA after he graduated from law school, and that's the experience that he has brought to Washington to make important decisions for us. We need to have real-world experience up there. Citizens who have been farmers, veterans, businessmen who are able to take that kind of experience and represent us. And I think we'd make a lot of progress without that would overcome partisan politics.
Well, it's kind of like the president only can have 2 terms, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's actually a certain age you have to be a president of the United States.
There is.
I don't think it's 25. I don't know what it is.
I think it's 35.
Yeah. So term limits are set on. On that you can't go beyond. We haven't seen that happen. Maybe in the future you have to rewrite the Constitution. So, well, I have one more question here for you, and I want to thank you again for coming by and sharing all the information that you have and what you believe in and where you want to go and as a in the third congressional district, and representing us here in Wisconsin. Let's go right to the question of why someone out there should vote for you, Steve, at the polls and in this early election or when they go on November 6th. Turn it over to you.
Well, I am honored to have been able to travel this district and meet thousands of you, and to have come to Wood County and Wisconsin Rapids many times. And I've heard what your concerns are. You're concerned that our current representatives don't represent farmers. They don't represent veterans. And they currently represent the special interest groups. I will work like I've worked throughout my 32-year military career. I will work for you. I will ensure that we have the kind of laws that we need to have great health care, to ensure that we strengthen Social Security and Medicare so our seniors always have that kind of support, and that we bring back money back to the state. You know, currently we're fixing California roads with our Wisconsin dollars. Wisconsin only gets about 70 cents on each dollar back in the state for our infrastructure. That cannot continue. So we need to have somebody in Washington, a real leader, to go to bat for us, to ensure that our interest here and our values are represented. You know, I was honored to have served our country, and I really want to continue to serve our nation and the people in this district. So God bless each one of you, and thank you very much.
Alrighty, Steve, thanks again for coming by and sharing that information. And you guys have about 5 days before the election. You can get out there and vote now, I believe. Every polling place does have a different rule, so please check where you are voting and if you can do early voting or not. I'm not sure when it exactly ends, but we all know we can vote November 6th, and you can find out your polling area right here in Wisconsin Rapids. There's 2 of them if you're living right in the city and you're watching us right here next to me, Centralia Center. That is where you can vote on the west side, and then back to Crossroads Church, which is over in the old Shopko Plaza. And that's the second place now that you can vote on November 6th. So the city will be there ready, and all the volunteers and elected people will be there on hand for you. So again, I want to thank you for joining me, Tom Loucks, Wisconsin Rapids Community Media Coordinator for the City of Wisconsin Rapids.